Welcome back to another episode of ChamberTalk, a podcast brought to you by Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce. For today's episode, we are placing a focus on Aberdeen's city centre, and we're recording from the recently regenerated Union Terrace Gardens. However, as beautiful as they are, footfall across Aberdeen city centre is down year on year by more than 1 million since the end of August. The data published by Springboard is simply figures. We have no definitive answer as to why footfall is down so much. But we've looked at the stats from August 27th when a series of additional bus gates were introduced into Aberdeen. So to talk about how we can build a modern day city and reverse the trend of falling footfall, and to discuss whether the bus gates are best for business, I'm going to be speaking to the North East Bus Alliance, Aberdeen Inspired, Aberdeen City Council, and one of the city's most prominent planning lawyers. Joining me now is Duncan Cameron, the Managing Director of First Bus Scotland. But today Duncan is here representing the North East Bus Alliance. Thanks for joining me, Duncan.
Pleasure.
On bus gates, just outline to us how they've benefited the people in the North East, because as with anything, there is two sides to this argument.
Yeah, there absolutely is. I think, there's a few points I'd like to make, but, we believe, as many others do, that, to have a vibrant, sustainable city, you need good pedestrianisation, good public transport. There's been a move towards some form of pedestrianisation, and the bus priority changes that have taken place over the last 6 months have helped improve public transport. They have resulted in bus journeys being sped up, which as a result we have made some resource savings to some services, and we've delivered that saving back to the customer. I always said at the start, this was, we wanted this to be a snowball effect. No benefit was going to go to First Bus's bottom line. It was going to be reinvested, and that's what we did. And that's why you saw the free travel offer, which was very well received in January, with passenger numbers up 20% certain weekends of the month, which is huge. And ever out with that period alone, the quicker journeys has resulted in more people travelling with us. We've brought, I think, roughly nearly 10% increase in passengers. This is just First alone I'm speaking for, which has brought 1.5 million passengers into city centre. So we want the bus priority to work for the city centre. Public transport is a derived demand. We want people coming into the city centre. We want people doing business in the city centre. We want people employed in the city centre, and we very much want to play our part in stating and selling Aberdeen as open for business.
You mentioned passenger numbers are up, and in some ways that was reflected in a price freeze for most bus fares, certainly from First Aberdeen, which was widely welcomed by businesses, passengers, everyone, I'm sure. There is a long way to go to get more passengers onto buses, for sure. What is your plan to convince people to get on a bus, to give it a go, given it is now one of the few modes of transport you can use, other than walking really, to get into the city centre?
I disagree with that. I mean, I'm a bus user, as you'd expect. We have one car for our family. My job takes me to Glasgow and elsewhere. When I'm in Aberdeen, I travel by bus. I also travel by car. I disagree with this notion that the city centre isn't accessible. When I'm using the car or by bus, I can access it. And actually, what I would say, since the bus priority came in, whatever mode of transport I use to access the city centre, I think congestion's down. So that is also another way it's benefiting the city centre. Congestion is not good for business. And I think I'd ask people with short memories to cast their mind back a few years where the city centre was snarled up with traffic. I certainly remember that being the case, where it used to take
pre-pandemic.
Yeah, it used to take you 30 minutes to go, from one side of the city to the other. Congestion is not good for business. That's why, to have a vibrant, sustainable city centre, you need quick and accessible journey times. And I believe the bus priority has provided that in a number of ways.
Would you accept the notion that perhaps the bus gates and I guess the threat of getting a fine, that's a council matter obviously, are perhaps a deterrent for people coming into the city centre? They're scared of getting a fine and they think it's easier to go to Shire.
I think you'll be aware that the North East Bus Alliance teamed up and did some marketing.
Yeah.
It wasn't that marketing and PR wasn't solely about using the bus. And why did we do that? Because we wanted to sell Aberdeen as being accessible for all and open for business. And the reason we did that was it was a reaction. Yes, I felt there was a lot of scaremongering, and as a result, we are up against people who think the city centre, as you've just said at the start, isn't accessible by car. When it actually is, and when you speak to some other people objectively, they agree. I know our Union Street have said, there's plenty car parking availability and there's plenty car accessibility. So I definitely think there is a perception that we are up against, and that perception will not help footfall numbers. There's no getting away from it. No. And we all, I think, if we've got Aberdeen, the city centre at heart, which we do, our Union Street's doing a great job, Aberdeen Inspired's doing a great job, we all need to get behind and support that work, and we need to reiterate that Aberdeen is open for business, and you can access the city centre by a number of ways, including bus, but not only bus.
So how can you, I guess, try and change that narrative then, that these bus gates are good for business and not turning people away, given the figures?
Well, I think the figures. First of all, you got to be careful not to read too closely into the figures. There's a couple of factors I would point to. One, when you look at the year-on-year figures, they've dropped less than what they have across Scotland. So that would suggest some consumer changes to retail. We are any city centre is working against online retail and other demographic changes, and that the fact the drop has been less than Scotland would suggest we're actually doing better than average. Yeah. I think as well, there's no doubt about it, I certainly remember autumn as a terrible month in terms of rainfall.
Storms.
Storms. And that is obviously going to affect people moving and wanting to come into town. So I think you do need to bear certain factors into account. There's variables, but we bus is a affordable form of transport. We've now 30% of our fleet is zero emission, so we've got the ability to attract people travelling with us in a more sustainable way. We are working very closely with retailers. I'm sure you're aware of a number of offers. Ultimately, bus is a derived demand. It's our interest to carry people to this destination, the city centre. So we are working with a number of retailers. We work with our Union Street, work with Aberdeen Inspired in terms of at no cost to the retailer, giving customers the discounted travel to come into the city centre. So there's as I said earlier, we funded a PR campaign to change the perception of how accessible the city centre is. So there's lots of ways that we are trying to make the city centre better with public transport as part of that offering. I think I would ask though that it's not just us. We need people to be a bit more objective about the changes that have taken place. I don't know any other successful city centre that doesn't prioritise public transport, because if it doesn't, you end up with congestion.
There is, we spoke about city centre businesses. There is a couple that have closed recently that have cited the bus gates, specifically Olive Alexander's, Barbelow and Golden Square. One of them, the Federation of Small Businesses, said they are a challenge, were their words, for those wanting to come into the city centre. Again, there's two sides to this. How would you say these have actually helped businesses, given some have closed and cited them as a principal reason for closing?
I don't know those businesses, so okay. I'm going to comment in regards to.
But I guess talking more widely then.
Yeah.
How have these been a success for businesses? Some have opened for sure, but some have blamed their closures in part on the bus gates.
Well, I think I would differentiate between the bus gates and the perception of the bus gates.
Okay.
You know, if everybody is going to scaremonger and put big signs up back in September, beware bus gates coming into Aberdeen, and you know, we've got to differentiate between what the bus gates are actually doing and this perception. You know, people have got to believe, and we've all got a job, that Aberdeen is open for business. The bus gates are, as I've said, when you look at it objectively, I certainly believe that they have reduced congestion, and for a number of, and we hear this from our customers, I've heard this from city centre stakeholders, they are providing quicker journey speeds into the city centre. So if they're allowing you to access the city centre more sustainably, quicker, and ultimately cheaper, as you've alluded to with our fares freeze, with the free travel, then that's clearly going to help the city centre, because we're helping to attract more people into the city centre.
Were you surprised at the reaction? You've talked about scaremongering, certainly on social media. There is a lot of it going on. Were you surprised at the negativity that, I'm not going to name publication or anything, but just to say social media, for example, the negativity that it received on various platforms, or was that kind of expected?
I think I was frustrated. But you know, we're a bus operator. We have a major, you know, part to play in the vibrancy of the city centre, and you know, with that comes a responsibility of educating people. It's change. Everybody has been crying out. Everybody has been crying out. I mean, we're in a nice office here. It's great to see Union Terrace, you know, been redeveloped, looking much more vibrant. But we all, you know, many years ago, there was a plan to change it. There was then a referendum against it. So what happened? Nothing happened. Yeah. These bus gates were part of a master plan, a massive master plan, which also includes the redevelopment of the market. It includes greater pedestrianisation, along with other benefits for Union Street. You know, I think my ask to everyone would be, you need to bear with it and see it all through. You can't ask for a master plan, and let's be honest, as a city, we're behind others in terms of their redevelopment. But we're finally getting some stuff off the ground. The council, you know, between what I've just outlined in terms of market, Union Street, there's a lot of redevelopment coming. We need to get behind it, and it all needs to happen. You can't expect a grand change and then start picking away at the edges as soon as stuff lands. There is an element, you know, to make an omelette, you need to break eggs. Yeah.
And there's a lot happening. We're seeing the Union Street Central kind of master plan, the streetscaping works begin, the market, as you've mentioned. Just to finally, you know, looking at these figures, there was a big reaction at the start, I guess, with change that is probably expected. It's lessened as time's gone on, for sure. Do you think the trend of falling footfall will eventually reverse?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're starting to see that in the figures. I think people are, the changes are bedding down. You know, as people travel into the city centre, they maybe find that, or they then get educated on what roads, if they're travelling in by car, how they can get in. And when they're doing it for the first time post the change, I appreciate that for a car driver, it takes a bit of planning. But yeah, I think you can see the footfall falling. When I've spoken to businesses on Union Street, I was, you know, generally in shopping, you know, most weekends in Aberdeen. When I was speaking 2 weekends ago, you know, there was a retailer on Union Street very positive about business. So, you know, I think I'm very optimistic that, you know, city centre footfall will continue to recover.
Joining me now, Adrian Watson, the Chief Executive of Aberdeen Inspired, the Business Improvement District. Adrian, you work hand in hand to improve and help businesses, the business sector as a whole in Aberdeen. Simply put, do these bus gates benefit them?
Well, in terms of a timeline, at the moment, the businesses feel no. There is a challenge. The figures are there in terms of footfall for the city centre, and they're very much down, from the inception in August last year, where we, as a city, introduced the experimental traffic regulation order, which essentially is the bus gates. And whether there is a perception out there more, both in the city and the Shire, which is very dear to us in terms of a market, that the city is more closed for business, that's certainly a feeling that is felt. And I think that's playing through in the figures. And I think it's incumbent upon us all to ensure that the message is very clear that the city is still open. It's not as you were. There is a transitional period we're going through with the bus gates, but it's open for business, and we need people to understand that, and more importantly, have the confidence to come into the city and use the wonderful businesses that we have at hand.
Can they work? Do you think there's a climate in which they can be a success? Prices were frozen, certainly by first. Numbers of passengers are up. Can, I guess, somehow, in some way, these work not just for bus companies, but for everyone, for businesses?
I think you're right to mention the public transport, particularly first, have made every effort to try and bring us through this transition period. And yes, in time, but there's lots of moving parts here. And as you can see, not far from where we sit, there's huge, ambitious work undergoing with the city centre master plan, where a significant portion of Union Street will be transformed in the coming months. It's a challenging time. I think we need to see all the constituent parts fall into place. I think connectivity is important, not just the buses, but a taxi service that is there and fit for purpose. Some great work going on that front, but still more to do. And that's well documented and another subject, but it needs to be said. And then eventually, when we see the repurposing of Union Street, it might well fall into place. But at the moment, I think I have to stress the businesses have a challenge or two around this. Some might say it's perception, some might say it's just change. But the reality is we have less people coming into the city centre. So we need to work collaboratively. When I say we, with the City Council and a host of other partners representing our businesses and giving them the best possible opportunity to bring them through this transitional period. And
it is worth mentioning, certainly yourselves, the council, us as the chamber, First Bus are all pulling very much in the same direction here. We want what's best for Aberdeen. Now, bus companies, it's up to First, it's up to Stagecoach and whichever operator to win people over. How do they win the businesses over?
Well, I think the proof will be in the pudding, and the bottom line is we need to see our footfall figures rise. It's objective evaluation. We can all have a perception and we can all get very subjective from our own corner and things, but the businesses have been quite resolute. I think your chamber survey mirrors almost what our survey has said, and it's over 90% have some real concerns. So we have to win the businesses over. And the way to do that is to get people into the city. And I suppose one key essential here is, led by Aberdeen City Council and the great partners you mentioned through the Chamber, through Aberdeen Inspired, our Union Street, et al., is to get behind a concerted effort day in, day out, to demonstrate that we're open for business, to show that the bus gates can be navigated with relative ease, to show that the car parks are still there, and there's some wonderful businesses, hospitality industry, retail, cultural sector offering second to none in the northeast of Scotland, and it's here and waiting for folk to come into.
And just lastly, in the long run, and you've touched on a couple of these projects already, when we see the work on the market just behind you complete, and the work on Central Union Street, George Street, other parts of the city centre, can these bus gates be effective, kind of hand in hand, I guess, with the entire master plan in creating a more vibrant, at the end of the day, busier city centre that benefits everyone?
It's just that last point, Finlay. If it's busier, then of course it is, and if we start to see those huge developments and ambitious plans that we have bear fruit, of course, then we will have a very much repurposed city centre where we'll give over more with a confidence to pedestrianisation, but there has to be accessibility, for the city and the region. And it's so important to us that we get the Shire market into the city. And that's often forgotten, and people need that confidence, whether it's through public transport or indeed through the vehicle, the car, that they can still access our city and come in and enjoy the experience, because there's plenty on offer.
I'm now joined by one of the co-leaders of Aberdeen City Council, Ian Yuill. Ian, thanks for joining me.
Not at all. Happy to be here.
To discuss. Firstly, simply put, would you acknowledge that there's a link between less people coming into the city centre through these footfall stats and the introduction of bus gates?
quite clearly the bus gates have changed how people travel in and around the city centre. Footfall statistics for cities across the UK have fallen since pre-pandemic levels. Aberdeen is no different. That's why the City Council is working with its partners to rebuild our city centre, to regenerate our city centre, to make it an even better place to live, to work, to shop, to visit a hospitality venue, or just to spend time.
And there is investment coming into the city. We'll talk about that in due course. Onto the bus gates. Who in your eyes benefits from them?
Well, first of all, pedestrians benefit, and those who live and work in the city centre benefit, because bus gates will reduce the number of vehicles travelling in the city centre on the 4 streets affected, which will reduce pollution levels. Evidence from around the world is that pedestrians and people like spaces without lots of cars and vehicles. In addition to that, obviously, bus passengers will benefit because bus services are more reliable, are faster, and that means in turn more bus passengers, which means more investment by the bus companies. And of course, car drivers still have access to every single car park in the city centre. I think there are 14 off-street car parks in the city centre, and there's still full car access to all of those.
What would you say to the businesses who have experienced themselves lower footfall compared with years previous, and who cite bus gates as one of the main reasons for why they believe they have lower footfall?
Well, footfall has dropped in Aberdeen since before the pandemic. That's absolutely the case. But Aberdeen's not unique in that. That's happened across Scotland, across the UK, and bluntly across the world. What we need to do is we can't go backwards. We need to go forwards, and that means investing in our city centre so that it becomes an even better place to spend time, to live, to work.
There's been a number of businesses, Olive Alexander's bar below, I'd cited earlier with Duncan from First Bus. They cited the bus gates as one of the reasons for their closure. The Federation of Small Businesses described the measures as a challenge. The owner of Juniper Gift Shop just on Belmont Street has been critical of them. He said they're confusing, they're a fear factor for those wanting to visit. Surely, if we want to get a more vibrant city centre with a range of businesses onto Union Street and in the surrounding areas, you want to make it as easy as possible for those people to access those places. And there's fears that the bus gates, from what just 3 of a number of businesses are saying, that they don't do that.
Well, I understand bus usage numbers are up, which is a positive for the city centre. And remember, not every household in Aberdeen has access to a car. I think the figures around 20% don't have access, maybe a little bit more than that. But see, again, this is a situation that's replicated around the world. And city after city and town after town has moved towards car-free city centres because that's what people like.
If you could speak to a business on, let's say, Belmont Street, just for example, what would you say to them to reassure them that you're on their side? Because many do feel like you aren't, because you've introduced the bus gates, which are having a serious impact on their business.
Well, what I would say is that the council's absolutely on the side of Aberdeen businesses. We're absolutely on the side, in particular, of locally owned and locally operated businesses, because in my view, those are the future of our city centre, not national chains, important though they are. If I was driving into Aberdeen city centre and coming by car and wanted to go to Belmont Street, I would park either at Harriet Street or I would park at the Denburn off-street car parks. Those are both very close to Belmont Street. It's not as if you can park on Belmont Street today, or even before the bus gates were put in. It's not as if you could have parked on Union Street before the bus gates came in. So I don't accept the analogy. Aberdeen city centre is open for all. It's open for car drivers. It's open for people who travel by bus. It's open for people who come by bicycle or walk.
Would you accept that the bus gates, though, are a deterrent for people coming into the city? Because they're a reason for them, a fear of getting a £60 fine as it was then, obviously now it's gone up. Would you accept that they do deter people from coming in because of fear of fines? Well,
clearly some people have said that, and I wouldn't argue with them that that's a reason that they are hesitant. What I would say is the signage is very clear. There's for the bus gates. It is only 4 short stretches of street in the city centre: Central Union Street, Bridge Street, the top end of Market Street, and Guild Street. They're well signposted, and you can still access every single car park in the city centre, off-street car park in the city centre, without going through a bus gate.
Bus operators will no doubt think they've been a success. City centre businesses, some of which may say they've been unsuccessful because footfall's down. As the leader, or the co-leader, should I say, of the City Council, would you say about 8 months or so into the bus gates being in operation, they've been a success?
To be honest, I want to see the results of the consultation that's been carried out with members of the public. I'm sure you know that the City Council Committee is due in June to review the operation of the bus gates and potentially make changes. We'll have to see, and I'm waiting to see what the analysis of the consultation responses says, what the data shows, and what the Council's traffic management staff recommend. But obviously my colleagues and I will be taking a view as well.
Of course, so there is, I guess, scope for change here, depending on what the consultation says, in spite of footfall figures being down.
The point of an experimental traffic order is so that you can change it. And certainly I'm not saying today that there will be no changes. We'll have to wait and see. I would say I'm looking forward to what the consultation analysis shows. And I would say once again that footfall figures in the UK and around the world in city centres are down since before the pandemic. Aberdeen is not unique. What we need to do is go forward and create that city centre that people want to come into, not go back to some mythical era before the pandemic and maybe even further before, when we had lots of shops, there wasn't an internet, and people were happy to come in and spend money in shops. Times have changed. So many people now shop on the internet, and that's their default. It's not I'll go on the internet if I can't find what I want in the city centre. They go first to the internet. So we have to have a city centre which has shops, other activities, other attractions which people want to visit in person. And that's what we need to move to. And we need to make our city centre as attractive and friendly for everyone, pedestrians, cyclists, car drivers, bus users, so that they come into our city centre, they spend time, they spend money, they visit hospitality venues, they visit attractions. That's the way forward. What we cannot do is go back to the 1980s or the 1970s.
I would agree with that. We need a variety of offerings in the city centre. I think that's for sure, and we need it to be vibrant and modern, and certainly it's welcome, the investment that's coming in. We're seeing just behind us work on the Union Street Central area get underway. Of course, Aberdeen Market is due to reopen after its redevelopment next year. We're sitting here in Union Terrace Gardens, which was recently reopened after its multi-million-pound development. And I think it's worth reiterating that despite disagreements on policy, us as the Chamber, you as the Council, bus operators, we are all pulling in the same direction. We might want it in different ways, but we all want Aberdeen to be a vibrant, modern, successful, busy city.
Well, as I understand it, the Chamber of Commerce actually supports the works on Union Street Central. It supports building Aberdeen Market. Yes, any work taking place is going to cause some disturbance, and that's really unfortunate, which is why it's important the work progresses as quickly as it can. But it's important to realise on Union Street Central, there will be continuous access to all the shops. There'll be continuous access for taxis west to east, so towards the beach, so that buses will be diverted either along School Hill or along Bridge Street, Guild Street, Market Street. But there will be continuous access to the shops and other facilities on Central Union Street. And at the end of that, we get a transformed Central Union Street, which is right for the 21st century, not the 18th century.
Just finally, what do you want the city centre to look and feel like when the public go back to the polls after your term as co-leader is done?
I want the city centre to be a place that people want to spend time, that the people enjoy spending time in, that people come into because it's the heart of their city, the real heart of our city. This is my home. I want it to be the best it possibly can be. And that's what it is almost now 30 years as a councillor. That's what I've always worked for. And that's what I will continue to work for. And that's what the council and the partnership that I represent will do.
Our Our fourth and final guest on today's episode is Elaine Farquharson-Black. Elaine is a partner at Brodies law firm and one of the city's preeminent planning lawyers. Thanks for joining me, Elaine. We've spoken already in depth about bus gates on this episode and touched on city centre regeneration. How would you make Union Street and the surrounding areas, I guess, a more attractive place to work, live or relax?
Gosh, that is a very wide question. It's a very wide question. Very wide question. Obviously, we all want to see Union Street back, bustling, full of people. It's all about the footfall. And so, I've just walked down from Brodies from the office that, down here to Union Terrace Gardens, and actually you can see the shoots of, regeneration. Yeah. There's more new coffee shops. Yeah. There's a new dress shop just as it's kind of coming down. You see scaffolding up. I quite like seeing scaffolding. A lot of scaffolding. I quite like seeing scaffolding. It's like seeing cranes. Yeah. You know then that something's happening, which is exciting. But if I was to say, what would it look like? It's difficult to tell. When I was growing up, there were lots of shops, department stores, but things change. And so Union Street's going to have to evolve. So it comes back to, well, what are people wanting? We still like to meet. So that's why I think we start to see more hospitality, which is great. People come in, meet up. Are we going to see retail back? It's quite difficult because we've all gone online.
Online, exactly, yeah.
And so to a certain extent, we're all, part of the problem, the way that we, shop nowadays, we shop online. So you want to see more people. I would like to see more people back working in the city centre because, again, that's footfall. Yeah. You want to see this is kind of hospitality, offices, things to do. Union Terrace Gardens is great now. It's been redeveloped. You can come and sit here at lunchtime, and people living. And that's probably the hardest one, I think, to get people back in living in the city centre.
Do you think, is there a chance, and I don't know how it would work around planning, but you look at all the various upper levels of the buildings on Union Street, the majority probably lying vacant right now, kind of cardboard up, you can't see in them, they all look a bit dusty, a bit old. Is there an opportunity there? You would think there was, and back in the day you would have lived above the shop, that would have been the kind of traditional, but it's quite difficult again, to convert these with with the offices below. Or shops below, and how do you get access to the flats and have it separate? How do you have your buckets, your waste and and your bins? Where are they? And so it would be good, but it's difficult, and so that's why I think you're seeing the kind of more niche, property developments that would take it on rather than kind of bigger normal mainstream developers. But it would be good to see that coming back, but it is quite tricky. Easier said than done, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
You've kind of touched on Union Street, I guess, in its past life. You've seen that. Where do you see Union Street going in the future? Which is a difficult question.
It is a difficult question. I'd like to see, is it going back to that, we're going to see the market,
which would be wonderful.
Yeah, I got my ears pierced, in the market when I was 13. And, it's going to come back in a new way, and that's the thing. We have to keep reinventing. It would be nice then to see, obviously, the Trinity Centre, Bonaccord Centre, all of these were of their time. What do we want to see? They'll be different. And I think that's that we're all scared of change. But it's about embracing that. The difficulty we have from a planning point of view, much the city centre, it's listed buildings, it's a conservation area, so we have tighter planning restrictions. But the council and the planning authority is doing things to try and encourage. So we talked about trying to encourage living. There's a moratorium on affordable housing contributions to try to encourage developers, because they recognise the kind of increased costs. Having chats, with the planners, they're trying to encourage redevelopment. I've done redevelopment of some of the properties on Union Terrace. Yeah. But at the end of the day, they haven't come forward. So they got planning permission, but they haven't come forward because there was a concern about investment in the city. Kind of generally. So the economy, where are we? Where are we going? So it's not just planning. That's the problem. Yeah. We can facilitate planning, and I always keep saying we should, as the city, make it easy for developers so they go, actually, I'll get planning permission within 8 weeks or 12 weeks, and that makes a huge difference. But at the end of the day, they've also got to have the confidence in the city as a whole. For sure, yeah.
How challenging is it? You touched on the listed buildings there. Many of these are listed buildings. It's a whole different
It is.
ballgame.
It is, because listed buildings, whilst they want them to come back into use, they try and preserve, the interiors and the exteriors, and that you have tighter restrictions of what you can do, and it's quite difficult. So looking at some of the conversions that we have done, you've got rooms that are there and you want to turn them into, bedrooms or whatever, and they might be smaller than normal. And they say, well, but that's not up to the space standards. Say, well, but if you want me to redevelop it, I've got to bring it back, and people just have to accept that the rooms are a little bit smaller. They might only be single aspect. So I think it's about having that kind of flexibility, and sometimes, as planners, we can get too kind of stuck in the rules, and let's look at the bigger picture. And it's all about the kind of economy. And that's why I keep trying to encourage people to say, what can we do to encourage the investment, to make it easy? And we might need to, kind of bend some of the planning, kind of rules, or take that kind of overarching view of it.
And just to kind of finish, you've touched on the scaffolding, and we are seeing it kind of busier in that sense on Union Street. The works have just started on the new market not long ago, and the central area of Union Street and Aberdeen, and it must be exciting, I guess, and you must be optimistic about the future.
Yeah, no, I am very optimistic. We have reinvented ourselves over many kind of decades, and seeing it, say that you want to see change, you want to see it coming forward. Encouraging people to come back into the city centre. You get that chicken and egg. People say there's nothing to come for. Say, well, yeah, but if you don't come for it, then people aren't going to. But as they just even in that walk down, I was quite excited about the number of kind of new units, and then the other part, with the kind of our Union Street and the improving the empty buildings. They look nicer. They're past one, it's painted bright blue, it's got a nice window,
and it's just a little thing, isn't it? But
it makes it
a huge difference.
Yes, and obviously when it's sunny as well, when you're walking down in Aberdeen, that's that's always exciting. But we do have a lot to look forward. We've got the master plan, for not just the Union Street but the wider areas, and that just takes time. We've got new art about to happen again, which is always, I think it's always exciting, because it encourages you to go back out and, rediscover your own city and parts, and, that you haven't been to for a while. So there's a lot, we've got lots of events as well, because again, what do you want your city centre? Is it a place to go and work, or is it a place to live, or is it a place, to go and meet up and do things? And what we want is to capture all of that and make it, as you said, a nice place to live, work, and play in.
We here at Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce, like the North East Bus Alliance, Aberdeen Inspired, Aberdeen City Council and our local business owners, want what's best for the Granite City. We want investment at scale into our city centre. We want Union Street and all of the surrounding areas to be vibrant, varied and, most importantly, busy. Because if they are busy, then our people are benefiting from a booming city centre. They're living here, they're working here, they're relaxing here, and our businesses are benefiting from more and more people coming through their doors. The multi-million pound investment into the central part of the Granite Mile is underway, as is the market, which I'm sure will be a game-changing new addition to the city. Aberdeen wasn't built in a day, and it won't be regenerated in a day either. We need you and I, our friends and our families, to make use of our theatres, our restaurants, our museums, our shops and our pubs. For us, the message is simple. Aberdeen is open for business.